Hey, everybody. Welcome to our second panel discussion on day one of Scaling Up. I have the pleasure of having Rich here with me. You guys probably all know Rich from our podcast, some of our events. Rich is our Chief Strategy Officer. Rich and I have been doing this together for 10 years. So
10 years, yeah.
it's great to have you as a co-host. Last year, I hosted all my panels solo, and this year I get to have a friend.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate being here.
And who better to bring, from the Cardinal team, maybe other than Alex Kemp, to our Data to Decisions, Transforming Healthcare Marketing with Better BI panel, than Rich to be our co-host. I'm super excited to introduce you all to our guests today. I'm going to call them out one by one. We're going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves and their organization, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. So first up on our list of panelists for today, we have Andrew Chang of U Chicago Medicine. Andrew, hey there, can you hear us?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome, thanks for joining us. Andrew, tell everybody listening a little bit about yourself and just about your organization, what you guys have going on, kind of your scale and scope.
Yeah, happy to be here again. Thank you for including me, inviting me here. So I'm in charge of marketing and PR and external communications at the University of Chicago Medicine. I've been here for just over 1 year now, and we're right now in the build phase of kind of our new marketing operating system, where we're building up a new tech stack, analytics, and attribution modeling, what have you. So it's been a lot of fun, a pretty big challenge, but having a great time.
Awesome. We're going to spend some more time talking about kind of your build process here in just a minute. Next up, let me introduce you all to Tom Stanton of Northwell Health. Let's see if we got Tom on here. Hey, Tom, can you tell everybody listening a little bit about yourself and Northwell?
Sure, Lauren. Thanks, and hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Tom. I'm the Director of Marketing Analytics at Northwell Health. We're a very large health system based out of New York. We're 20 hospitals, over 80,000 employees. So pretty big footprint. And where we are is within what we call an internal agency. So we have a centralized marketing department. We work kind of with people inside the department and across, all the different areas of New York City and Long Island primarily. And yeah, as far as what we have going on right now, we've got a few data migrations going on. We're moving our EHR over to Epic. We're kind of ramping up with Salesforce as a CRM, and moving a lot of our cloud databases as well. So certainly a lot going on. One other interesting thing just about our health system is, we're a big part of our marketing that's been growing out is within the entertainment space and doing content, partnering with streaming services to create original documentary content. So a lot
Check
of cool
out the content on Netflix. 10 out of 10 recommend. We can give those some shout outs. We spoke this morning about how marketing wears many hats, and I'm, noticing that every single one of you all have slightly different titles. Next up, we've got Clay Nickens, Vice President of Strategy and Growth at Action Behavior Centers. Hey, Clay.
Hey, everybody, really excited to be here today. So Action Behavior is the nation's largest provider of applied behavior analysis for children who are on the autism spectrum. My responsibilities include, as Lauren was mentioning, growth and strategy. So business development, new service line development, strategic partners, and marketing, kind of all within that umbrella. And within marketing, our organization serves not just potential new patients and families, but also supports our physician liaison and recruiting teams. In terms of kind of where we are as a marketing organization, we've been super focused on bottom of funnel people who are really ready to start services. And our journey over the next year or two is to have a more fulsome relationship with potential patients. And using data to do that is part of our day-to-day. So again, excited to be here.
Speaking to Rich and I's hearts here on the BI front, Clay. Last up, we'll bring Ibrahim Albaba into our panel of CLS Health, and then we'll kick off the discussion. Ibrahim, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and CLS?
Hey guys, my name's Ibrahim. I'm the Director of Growth and Strategy at CLS Health. CLS Health is Houston's largest physician-owned, physician-led healthcare organization, and that's kind of central to our belief in and our core value as an organization. my responsibilities, like Clay, is very similar, but I like to say that my job is to grow CLS both in revenue and value, and anything that touches that, I touch it. And so that includes business intelligence, BI, business development, mergers and acquisitions, and then finally the marketing team. And BI is really central to everything that we do as a company, and it's where I actually started and then eventually grew into kind of a larger role. It's excited to be on this panel. Thank you guys.
Something really cool about all of you. You all have, whether it's passion or by trade, kind of a background in BI and analytics, and then you've kind of found the best way to leverage that in kind of marketing growth and strategy at your organizations. Rich, I'm going to let you kind of kick off with our first question, which we want to put out to each of you, just to kind of understand, where, and you all touched on it a little bit already, your current state of your business kind of intelligence function, but want to dive a little bit deeper into what you guys are working towards. So Rich, I'll let you kind of put out the question to our first panelist, and we'll go around the circle.
Yeah, I feel like this is the trick for every analytics professional and data professional, right? Which is, what is the promised land, and how do you get there, and how do you prioritize that workload between deploying media mix modeling, multi-touch attribution? There's so much that you could do to leverage data to make your organization more effective. So we'd love to know from you guys, what your focus is and what your priorities are for 2024 and 2025 to make your organizations more effective in terms of the way that they use data, and what the biggest challenges are that you face to achieving those things. So in no particular order, I guess maybe I'll just pick on someone, but like Tom, why don't you kick us off if you may?
All right, sure. Yeah, so thanks, Rich. And you mentioned kind of tools and techniques, right? But where our focus is going to be is a little bit more on kind of process and relationships within our department. I think what we want to do is do a better job of speaking the same language as our business partners, and making sure that kind of we are very aligned with, on our thinking, so that it's not request and response. It's more of a collaborative strategic conversation where, we make it more apparent what is possible, and they make it more apparent what the problem is that they want to solve. So getting BI more directly tied to decision making is kind of the main thing, and how we measure value and the actions that we're taking more directly, and thinking about future decisions, not past decisions and what happened. So that's the kind of the main direction that we want to go. So that's going to take form in obviously kind of reaching out and setting up some more opportunities to collaborate, but that's going to be kind of getting really in the weeds of what people's processes are and how they make these decisions now.
Got it. Yeah, makes total sense. What about Clay? How are you thinking about improving
actually,
data
I'm going to
adoption?
segue. I'm just going to go in sort of the jet stream here that you've established. The phrase that we use is democratization of data, but it's very similar in terms of theme. Like you were saying, you have to get the details right, whether that's multi-touch attribution or just cleanliness of the data of a well-governed set of data sources. But then putting that in a position where users in the organization, decision makers in the organization, can access that in a really ready to serve and fast basis is sort of our focus for the remainder of 2024 and probably early 2025.
And Clay, in terms of like, who are the stakeholders in that for you at Action?
Yeah, so we have a pretty tight-knit team here in Austin. We also have folks, all over, multi-site locations. But in terms of, making that democratized, ensuring that our C-suite is fully read in on what's happening, even at a very granular level, allowing them to do that dig in, deep dive that'll probably resonate with a lot of people who are listening in on this, is executives always want to go deeper. But then being able to serve up the right level of information for somebody who's in an individual center and trying to make a decision about how to work through the pipeline of prospective families.
So it's really everybody. You've got this like BI is for everybody, right? Not just the person with the, strategic analytics title at the organization.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
It's
Ibrahim,
it's
what about you?
2024, right?
Yeah, this year. We'll get into next year in a minute.
Yeah.
Ibrahim, what about you? What are some of the challenges you guys are facing?
Yeah,
And you know, what's the end state look like for you?
I think to tackle the second part of the question, the end state, and I like to say like from, and I'll talk about this from a data science perspective, me being wearing the data science hat, that I think the genesis of any data business intelligence team is this. It's first, you want to know the past. You want to analyze. How good are you at analyzing the past? And then after that, you really want to get to, well, what's happening day to day. Let's get monitoring tools up there. And then once you get really good at analyzing and the monitoring, the next step is the future, and it's predictive analysis. And I think that's generally the genesis. And I think what happens sometimes is people try to kind of jump ahead. What we want to do is really nail down those previous two things. I think, prediction comes later. Now, to kind of segue to Clay's point, I mean, what's the end state? What's the best ideal situation? From a business intelligence perspective, I think BI in many ways is kind of this glue, just like he said, but it's glue that holds together a lot of different departments. And I think that, sometimes we exist in silos, and the data brings us together towards this sort of main vision. And what I mean by that is, if you really think about it, you want to connect the marketing people to the finance people, and the marketing people to the revenue cycle, to the IT operations people, to the actual care operations, to the physicians. And the way you're going to do that is through business intelligence, because marketing is not just a marketing problem. Marketing is a finance problem. Marketing and RCM is a marketing problem, right? So there are all these factors and facets. You really want to just get everybody on the same page behind one thing. And I think BI and business intelligence is going to be that department that's going to be able to bring that all together. So I think that's the kind of the end state, bringing people together, analyzing, monitoring, and then maybe one day when you get really, really good at it, let's start predicting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna talk a little bit about predictive propensity modeling here in a minute. Andy, I'm curious, when we think about, and I'll ask this back to the rest of the group too, you've got to get those first two steps really good and clean and solid. You're going to need the right technology and the right team on whether they're, BI professionals by trade, external partners, you've got kind of marketing individuals that you're training up. What does an ideal kind of infrastructure look like for you to be able to accomplish that? Do you have any kind of tools or technologies that you're leveraging, and what might a good team look like, the right roles and responsibilities?
Yeah. First of all, amen to what Ibrahim was just saying. A very passionate speech. I'm very inspired. So thank you for that. Second is in terms of the roles and responsibilities and how we build the team, there's a few things that I require every single person that has worked for me to go through, which is a course that I had to go through when I was at UPS, and then eventually teach, called Insights to Action. And it's basically how to interpret data and then turn that into insights, which is not just a regurgitation of the data. And then lastly is, how do you turn that into actionable next steps, and making sure that you're not just telling a story with no end. And so it doesn't matter what department or what team you're on. You may be a graphic designer, you still have to understand how data works. So that's number one. And then number two is, I've worked in places where BI has been kind of centralized under finance or under IT, or it's been a very federated model with everyone has their own analysts and data scientists. But at the end of the day, the way that the model should work is kind of what Clay was saying earlier, is the data easily accessible from a democratization standpoint. And second is the data trustworthy? If I took results from one dashboard that's built and showed it to the service line, the service line should say, yeah, I saw that too, not where did you get this from? Same thing for finance. And so making sure that data is trustworthy doesn't mean it has to be 100% accurate, right? Like, as long as everyone knows there's what the assumptions are and what could be a little off, that's fine. That's what should be happening. But there's got to be a trust level and layer on the data itself. And then lastly is we try to make everyone on the team a business owner. So the question that I'll ask is, if this was your own business, if you owned this business, as you know, Ashley's knee replacements are us, or whatever it is, what would you be looking for? Not just from a social media campaign standpoint, like the whole experience. What are you looking for to make sure that your business is running in the best way possible? And so it makes you think beyond campaigns. It really forces you to think about from the customer standpoint as well as financials, everything else. And so, so trying to just have an ownership mindset, learning how to tell stories with data, and making sure that everyone's on the same level and the same page in terms of the data trust aspect as well.
Yeah, and Clay, you talked about democratizing data. Any kind of tips on how to best do that? Have you kind of solved that from like a platform perspective? Any advice on, what organizations might want to put in place? Basic data warehouse, how can people access the data? How can you make it, available for the democracy?
I don't think we've solved it to start with. And the second thing is that at our organization, I have the advantage of a single service line today, a relatively standardized model if you compare our organization to, Andy and Ibrahim's and Tom's. But that permits us to do a more purist approach to this, which is single data warehouse, serve that up in a controlled format depending on the user's sophistication. So our finance team is going to have better access, more kind of access to the raw underlying data without assumptions or cleanup necessarily, than say a user who's in one of our centers who needs a more kind of distilled and curated experience. But no, I don't think we've solved it.
It's an evolution. Yeah, I don't know that, no one's ever going to probably just, point to a time and say it was solved. It's going to evolve. There's going to be new data points and KPIs that you hadn't thought of before that you want to build into it. You get great questions from the field that help you realize I need to make that data available too. So I appreciate that mindset.
This is enabled, maybe one thing to add here is this is enabled by getting the boring small details right. What are your standardized center codes? What are the keys that you need to basically connect your various data sources, and being realistic about what's possible to interconnect and not. But if you don't have a clean setup of those keys and the crosswalk associated, which is unique, immutable IDs is like probably the key phrase most often, then you won't be able to do any of the other cool stuff that you want to. And it's not fun, but you got to go through every single one of those and make sure they're right in all of your systems. And then you have the feedback process to catch when one system may fall out of compliance with your standardization scheme.
Do you guys think that is the biggest hurdle in terms of building a great BI function inside of an organization, is data cleanliness, data accessibility, or is it, resourcing? Is it time? Is it ever changing goals and objectives of an organization, the different needs of stakeholders? What are the biggest challenges in terms of getting to that promised land of that perfect BI function?
Tom, I'll ask you first.
I'll go for it because I can build on what Clay was saying. Is I think that it's that they're all considerations, but for sure a lot of the inefficiency that would come out of everybody's BI function is going to be those things that Clay called out. It's the lack of stable foundation to build on top of. It's data quality. It's defining things once. There's a term in data engineering that's called DRY, DRY, don't repeat yourself. We want to define these things once in our data warehouse, and never have to go back to it and rewrite the same SQL queries or pull the data again. So that's absolutely where we are right now, is knee deep in data quality stuff and modeling these different pieces of the business. One of the tools that we're hoping to bring on soon is a semantic layer, which is kind of sits kind of between the data warehouse, even the clean data sets, and the actual reporting tools. And the idea with that is that you define, metrics and what's called entities, right? Whatever these business objects are, one time, and then it's something that you can kind of not have to go back and waste your analyst time of just data wrangling and cleaning it up later on. The idea is that it's all ready to go, and you just kind of poke around until you are looking in the right place, and then you can really accelerate what you can do from there. So it's it is the boring overhead that has to go first.
Ibrahim, I know you mentioned you're in phases 1 and 2 as well. Does that resonate with you? It's kind of you're at that point. That's the hurdle at the moment.
I guess we have different kind of challenge, because like I said, we have a centralized BI team. So I always think about what's the centralized BI team's challenges. Data accessibility in general is always going to be that one. But I think what we've done to solve that is kind of like what Andrew said, is create people, make them business owners. And I think there's a mentality, I don't know how to say this, but the kind of, you're probably like most of the time you're going to maybe be wrong. Like there's probably things you're wrong about. And there may be, the data might be wrong. You have to be humble enough to understand that. And you have to be curious enough to find it. And I think by creating business owners, you empower them to, challenge your thing. So I'll just to kind of give an example. I know I may not be answering the exact question, but it's something to think about. Because, a lot of people's calculations are completely based on their own assumptions. The biggest drivers to improving our calculations to any sort of metric, believe it or not, has been physicians. And that's because we sit with physicians one-on-one and we explain to them exactly how we did it. And then they ask us questions that we've never thought of. They say, well, did you consider that, this and that, or that and this, or like, the big one is, how do you calculate customer acquisition costs? One thing people ask, well, how did you exclude X segment or Y segment? I'm like, wow, that's a really good point. But instead of kind of in those QBRs or whatever you're doing and just, hey, glossing over, hey, CAC is this, LTV is that, using the jargon, really breaking it down and sitting with those really end stakeholders and being humble enough to accept the fact that you might be wrong. The classic thing in data science or engineering is junk in, junk out. Is the thing that's coming in, is it junk, or am I somewhere in the middle? Am I missing some sort of calculation steps? So I think, that's my 2 cents on this subject.
Ibrahim, I think that's a perfect segue, because I want to bring kind of this discussion down into the marketing layer. A lot of our listeners today are marketing leaders at their organizations, and they're wondering, okay, I've got an individual perhaps at my organization like Clay, like Tom, like Ibrahim, like Andrew, who's kind of owning kind of this step of it. And I'm the marketer sitting here trying to figure out, how am I going to use this data? How am I going to ask the right questions, improve data literacy at my organization? And the key being to glean the insights to inform the next decision on where to put the next dollar, the next audience, to find the next kind of channel mix decision. How I would love to hear from each of you kind of what the holy grail of KPIs for marketing effectiveness look like at your organization right now. And, this is probably going to look different for everyone, and it might be just based on where you are in your evolution, what your organization cares about. Andrew, I'd love to hear from you. Kind of what are the marketing KPIs that you're most interested in looking at?
Yeah, there's 4 that I'm trying to hold us accountable for. Number 1 is return on marketing investment, ROMI. Number 2 is return on ad investment, ROAS. Number 3 is cost per acquisition. Number 4 is brand health. So you're trying to measure the whole funnel the whole time. And ROMI is important because that is ultimately what we would be reporting back to our stakeholders. And ROAS is important because it's normally the largest part of anyone's budget is the media spend. And we have to always make sure that we're using it efficiently and effectively. Third is cost per acquisition, because I think of healthcare, especially with the primary care and urgent care side, as kind of like the milk that grocery stores will sell. They put it in the back of the aisle.
Get to the back.
It's why you go, right? And primary care is that way, and it's usually a break-even kind of proposition. So managing costs is pretty important. And lastly is, of course, you can't forget about brand health. So that includes awareness, perception, preference, etc. And so those are the main 4 key metrics. And by definition, they're incremental and revenue based. So you have to have a system that's able to measure incrementality and also revenue, not just clicks or form completions, lead submits, et cetera. You got to get down to the revenue and how deep and how connected you can make that down to the patient level by campaign or by whatever tactic you have is all part of that equation.
And Andrew, do you have mechanisms to think about those holistically? Are you looking at kind of like last click attribution, multi-touch attribution? Like, I think that's a big challenge for marketers nowadays, is to measure something like ROMI or ROAS without necessarily having each channel's direct contribution be a straight line.
Yeah, I mean, everyone starts out with last touch or and then move on, then typically then move to MTA, multi-touch, and then marketing mix modeling. We're building out a CDP right now. We're about to launch it in the next 2 weeks with Salesforce Data Cloud, and so all of our campaigns are going to start from there and end there, so that we have that data, the data flow all connected, which is also connected to our EHR, so that we can track it down to the patient level. And so all of our agencies are connected to it, and patient data is connected to it, CRM is connected to it, et cetera. And so that's really where we use that as the main source for measuring the incrementality, et cetera, plus other A/B tests that we'll do along the way for different types of campaigns. But yeah, I think I answered your question. I actually kind of forgot.
You answered it and then some. That was incredible. Thank you. I mean, super helpful to understand how an organization like yours with so many different business units and stakeholders is thinking about, you know, data in a single kind of fashion. You've got all your agencies plugged in, your business owners. And I like that you mentioned the tech that you're using too. Thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of organizations are wondering kind of, where do I start? What are the best of the best using? Is it worth investing in something like a Salesforce, or do I kind of try to patch together my own systems to get myself off the ground? So it's nice to kind of see what a large organization end state might look like. Ibrahim, I'd love to ask you the same question, marketing KPIs, what you guys are measuring, and, you know, kind of challenges in that vein.
Yeah. You know, and we may start saying the same answers, but it's I think very, very similar to what Andrew just said. I will tack on lifetime value, although lifetime value is built into his, you know, the previous functions. However, the way that we as an organization operate is on a physician account level. And so what we're trying to do is get every physician to a profitability, not the system into profitability. So in many ways, Andrew's kind of example of the milk in the back, it won't work for us because we need the milk to be in the back and the milk to make money because we're working on an account basis. So we really have to understand lifetime value. And then a little bit below that is what we're trying to now do is move towards, can we understand LTV, obviously by channel, by specialty, whatever, but then below that is LTV by maybe a condition or LTV by a service. And I guess that's like the one add-on I'll add to Andrew. What we're trying to do is, once you understand that LTV and then you understand your customer acquisition costs, you can work with your finance team to figure out, well, what's it going to take to get us to profitability, right? Like, what's the actual spend it's going to take to kind of bring us to what a primary care provider needs to, how many patients they need to get, or whatever specialty we may be talking about. So I guess that's my only add-on to Andrew's. I think that's obviously, there's some other ones I'd look at. You know, you're kind of on a paid media side. What's your conversion rate down every single step of the funnel, right? I think maybe there's a question coming on later about that specific topic, so I won't get into it. But I think and that's on the paid side, and then there's some other aspects that people might want to look at, and sometimes it's not touched upon, and I think this is kind of fascinating because it's not really a marketing necessarily, but marketing touches it, which is these sort of functions that are touching your marketing dollars. That might be a referral team. Like, you may be putting dollars spent to get a referral into the door, and then your referral team doesn't know how to convert them. And so you might start building out certain KPIs, and I'll just start listing some of the things that we look at when we're talking about referrals. Because for us, a CLS, a multi-specialty clinic, 50% of our volume comes from referrals. So if we're not focusing on that 50%, then you're really kind of lost as a marketing team. That is we have to really hone in on that. And we're working with that BI team to come up with those key performance indicators. KPIs, I'll just list them. We could say, percentage of patients that, are outreach within 24 hours, percentage of patients that are booked, percentage of patients that are booked within 7 days. Once you can kind of get those metrics, guess how easy it is to go back to those referring systems or doctors and go back to the village medicals and show them real data. Say, look, that every single time a patient comes through the door, we reach out to them 24 hours, they're seen in 7 days, blah, 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 blah. It's powerful stuff, but it also aligns your operational teams on the things that matter to marketing as well. So, and they do impact marketing. And the same thing can be said about call center. And the same thing can be said about maybe if your IT manages, your scheduling form, if you're using Hilo or Epic or whatever the heck you're using, that sort of scheduling flow. Well, what's the conversion on every single step of the way? I mean, I'll say one last tidbit. We found that when you show patients the scheduling calendar, you increase you at the beginning rather than the end, you increase your completion rate by 50%. Like, that's just fascinating, right? So you got to look at all these things, because at the end of the day, they affect all the things that Andrew said downstream, which is turn on ad spend and customer acquisition cost and whatnot.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about propensity modeling here in a minute and how some of those things impact it. Clay, just really quickly before we move into that, your business is very different. There isn't, milk in the back and kind of these other things. Like you mentioned early on, we have a single kind of set of services that we offer to a very similar set of individuals. What are your metrics that you guys are looking at, and each of your locations being a separate business unit and part of a market and part of a system?
Yeah, so we hold our marketing team to 3 metrics. The first is access, which could be measured by qualified lead generation. The second, and so expanding access, making sure that families are hearing about us and considering us in a fulsome way if they're ready for services. The second is efficiency, so how much are we spending for each of those leads, cost per lead. And the third is what you're referencing on us being multi-location with several hundred locations that each need families who are considering services to be considering them. And so it's not just the lead generation, but it's the accuracy versus the availability at each of those centers. Some centers have been there longer, they're more mature. They only have, a handful of openings. There are others that just opened this week and could accommodate a couple dozen families over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. There's a lot of overlap, and you guys each are in different kind of phases of determining what's most important to the business. Rich, I'm going to stop kind of collecting this baseline information like I always just do all the talking, and let Rich ask a little bit. I know we want to get into kind of forecasting, propensity modeling, and some of the really cool stuff that's to come, maybe once you hit phases 1 and 2, like Ibrahim mentioned early on.
Laura makes my job really easy. She saves my voice. But I think, yeah, I mean, obviously we've talked about a lot of the foundational layer and a lot of the grunt work that has to be done to get to a point where we have the data that we can then enable some of the cool, more fun stuff to do. So I'd kind of like, just rather than forcing the conversation down a specific path, I'd love to know from you guys, what is the most high impact thing that you do with your data as an organization once you have it readily available to you? And what helps, we talk about ROMI, we talk about ROAS. What's really helped you with data enablement to move the needle the most as an organization by leveraging that data? And again, just to not break with the pattern, Tom, I'll pick on you first.
All right, sure. I think for us, since I didn't get in on that last question, also the brand health is a big one that we take a look at. So that is a lagging indicator that is very meaningful to us. That we kind of have used a lot, especially I mentioned that we are spreading out in the entertainment marketing space, which is just kind of new frontier completely for this industry. To look back and see the positive effects on those are great. And then we coupled that with we did also some modeling of kind of what that impact looked like too, based on what we've got. So it was forecasting based measurement of kind of what was the traffic that was coming into our website. Projected out, what a typical curve looks like, at that time of year, and then looked at what actually happened, and it's just a flat line versus a mountain. So it was an impactful kind of visual story that we were able to kind of distill down into, it's an estimate of the incrementality of just the exposure of that show on, not only those brand health metrics, but also people actually coming to check us out and making their way into appointment flows too. So those are, I'd say, those are the sexy stories that we have. It's mostly kind of, slow kind of wins here and there, but those are some of the interesting ones that we want to keep building on and use that for smaller scale campaigns. Just one other area is recently my team was working on doing, we're kind of at the close of budget season here for 2025, and using actual historical return on channel investment, to try and get to the answer of what's the right spend level for paid search, for example. So we go and take a look back at, well, over the course of time, we've invested, at these different levels, and we build out a diminishing return curve, which is nice because the theory matched the, what the data was actually telling us. So we were able to kind of reach that point of what's the break even, because we've got an acquisition cost that we can put on top of it, and we could say for, what we used was a marginal acquisition cost, right? So every additional X number of dollars that you spend, how efficient is that, right? As you keep going up and up, and then we identify kind of where that sweet spot is. So that was a pretty cool and very recent one.
Tom, I'm curious, and Rich, cut me off if this is too far, but like, how noisy was that? As you're building towards it, because there's so many things that can happen that influence the outcome you're measuring. So how do you balance kind of signal noise and getting an answer that's acceptably accurate?
Yeah, this one, we aggregate it at a monthly level, right? The more you zoom out, the more you can smooth out that curve for sure. We were good because we had a lot of variation in one area of the business that we were focusing on, where it proved out to kind of follow the pattern we would expect. But in another area, yeah, we couldn't go further because there wasn't enough variation in how the business spent before, right? So we can say this section of Long Island, we know what the break even, but in Manhattan, like where we kind of are pretty stable with what we're spending, we said we don't really know what incrementality looks like. We can't make a recommendation there. So like this we also like because it leans more into the conversation of, hey, you need to get more experimental. Let's work together. We'll try things, just test and learn. We'll try things, we'll collect signal, and then we'll know more, so that we can inform the future.
And then on that, and picking up on something that you said earlier, Andrew, about the deployment that you were going through currently with Salesforce and tying everything together and then providing access to your agencies. Andrew, how do you empower your agencies to help with some of this data actioning and some of the better decision making based on the data that you're making available to them? And what does that successful partnership with agencies look like between your BI team and their teams to make the most of the data that you're making available to them?
Yeah, the way that we make it actionable is in a few different ways. Number one is that from an existing patient standpoint, which is the majority of most healthcare's patient base, it is really trying to understand at a very granular level, because of today's day and age, of how many different segments we can create. I believe we should be creating a lot of segments down to potentially ICD-10 or CPT codes to define who we're really going after. And that's part of the data that's being fed into our CDP today. And based on that, we'll make specific segments, like one campaign could have 10 different segments. Yes, it does increase your cost, but it also, guess what? Because it's relevant, it also increases your return. And so based on the very defined segments that we create, and then we also use third-party tools with Experian and Mosaic modeling to tell the agency these are the types of psychographic or mosaic segments that you should be going after, or these are the lookalikes that you should be creating to go after for new patient acquisition, or here's the IDs of the actual people that we really need to click to confirm that appointment or book that appointment. They started down the path and they didn't finish, so now we're going after them, trying to get them to book that appointment. And so obviously data connection to the agency, whether they use Trade Desk or whatever platform they're using, is absolutely essential, because again, it feeds back into our CDP, and then we're able to tell the agency, or the agency can see for themselves which segments are performing for which creative, and how we should be tweaking our different strategies for whatever platform we're on and whatever the goals are.
Got it. And I know we've only got 3 minutes left.
Yeah,
And
let's
so,
wrap us up
yeah,
here.
well, I was going to say in 30 seconds, tell us all what your biggest, each of you tell us all what your biggest focus is with data in 2025, but it has to be within 30 seconds. So I'll do the countdown. No, I'm just kidding.
Awesome. We've got Andy off mute, so we'll start with you.
Mine is pretty simple. It's successful execution of our new marketing OS, which involves what I just talked about, starting with Salesforce with definition of segments, and then being very strict and disciplined on sticking to that process for creation, strategy, measurement, everything.
Awesome. Tom?
It's finishing out a lot of the data quality work for sure. And what we want to start building on top of that is where we model our business, where we plot out, to Ibrahim's point, every point along the conversion funnel. We identify what are the value drivers, what are the KPIs. If anyone's interested to dig in more, it's the concept of a metric tree, where you actually get into what every single piece is and how that ties into your business model and customer journey.
And Ibrahim, I know we had kind of similar line of questioning when we were discussing with you kind of the metrics along the patient journey, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Your biggest focus for 2025?
I think two focuses: attribution modeling, kind of improving that across the board. And then lastly is exactly what Tom just said, is and what I'm really focused on right now is we're building our new website and making sure we understand that site and how users interact with it at a very granular level, so we can track all those things that we just talked about.
Always a huge project. And Clay, I'll have you bring us home. Biggest focus for next
Yeah.
year? Any tools or tech that you love? What are you focused on?
Is it bad if I say all of the above? I mean,
Yeah.
the core mission that we're on from a marketing perspective, what I mentioned earlier, is being able to reach earlier into the funnel, build those relationships, and have data oriented with it. We have a great entrepreneurial culture. People are excited to go out and test and try things. And so having the clean data, the multi-touch, the ability to do uplift analysis on mid or early funnel tactics that enables our team to have a very high cycle rate on those tests.
Awesome. You guys heard it here first. If you are kind of looking for your takeaways from today's segment, do not feel the pressure to leap all the way to, I need to be building a propensity model. Let's start by getting the right data, the right clean data. Let's kind of do it once, as Tom would say, and then grow into those things. Don't try to kind of leapfrog steps 1 and 2. It can be overwhelming. You kind of end up feeling like you're a hamster on a wheel and never really reaching a desired end state. So we had a million more questions for this panel. I could talk to you guys all day long. My favorite subject of the 2 days, but we will continue those conversations offline. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you everybody for listening. I think we've got a little lunch break now in the panel sessions, and we'll resume back in about an hour with our afternoon sessions. Thanks guys for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
everyone.
Thanks for having us.